Growing up, my father was the joke of the family. He was the unsuccessful brother, the one who worked a grueling, blue-collar job at the shipyard, while his siblings became doctors and high-flying lawyers. And every Thanksgiving, my uncles would sit in their designer suits and offer him advice on how to manage his life, while my father just sat there in his flannel shirt, nodding and eating his turkey in silence. I was ashamed of him. I saw his calloused hands and his old truck, and I compared him to my cousin's fathers who drove luxury cars and went on European vacations. I was the scapegoat's son, and I felt the weight of his failure every time I had to wear hand-me-down sneakers to school. My mother passed away when I was 10, and Dad never remarried. He just worked. He was always tired, always covered in grease, and always quiet. He didn't give me big speeches. He just made sure there was milk in the fridge and that my tuition was paid on time, though he always seemed to struggle to find the money at the last second. When I graduated from college, I moved across the country. I wanted to distance myself from the struggle of my childhood. I sent Dad a card once a year, but our conversations were short. He'd ask if I was eating enough, I'd ask how his back was. I was living the life he couldn't, a life of success. Last year, my father passed away quietly in his sleep. I flew home to settle the estate, which I assumed would be a depressing task of clearing out an old rented house with no assets. My uncles were already there, talking about how they'd have to chip in for the funeral because poor Leo probably didn't leave a dime. They looked at his old house with pity. I felt a surge of that old shame mixed with a new hollow guilt. I had made it, but I had left him behind in this quiet, dusty failure of a life. While clearing out his workbench in the garage, the only place he ever truly looked happy, I found a small, iron lockbox hidden behind a stack of rusted tools. I found the key in his top drawer. I expected a few old photos or maybe some unpaid bills. Instead, I found a leather-bound ledger. The first page was dated the day after my mother's funeral. It wasn't a diary, it was an account book, but the names in the book weren't his creditors, they were my uncle's. I spent the entire night reading that ledger. I found out that 20 years ago, when the successful Uncle David's business was collapsing, it was my failure father who gave him $50,000 to keep him out of jail. When Uncle Peter's daughter needed that experimental surgery that insurance wouldn't cover, it was my father who worked double shifts at the shipyard for 3 years to pay the bill anonymously. The ledger documented every cent. He had given away millions over 30 years. He hadn't been struggling to find my tuition money because he was poor. He was struggling because he was busy paying off the secret debts of the very people who mocked him at dinner. He had made them all sign agreements never to tell me or the rest of the family where the money came from. He didn't want the credit. He didn't want the hero status. He wanted his siblings to keep their dignity, even if it meant he had to lose his. He lived in that small house and drove that old truck, not because he had failed, but because he had chosen to be the foundation that kept the rest of the family from sinking. He was the only truly successful man in the room, and he was the only one who didn't feel the need to prove it. The day of the funeral, my uncles gathered in the front row, looking down at the plain casket. Uncle David started to give a eulogy about poor, hard-working Leo who didn't quite find his way. I stood up. I didn't shout. I didn't get angry. I just walked to the podium with the ledger in my hand. I read the dates. I read the amounts. I watched the blood drain from their faces as I revealed the truth in front of the entire community. I showed them that every suit they wore, every car they drove, and every success they bragged about was bought with the sweat and silence of the man they were currently patronizing. The silence in that church was the loudest thing I've ever heard. It wasn't a moment of revenge. It was a moment of reclamation. I was giving my father back the one thing he had sacrificed for them, his reputation. I didn't take their money back. I didn't ask for interest. My father had already forgiven them, and it wasn't my place to unforgive. But the dynamic of our family changed forever. My uncles no longer talk about success. They look at their own hands and realize they are holding things they didn't earn. I moved back into my father's house. I'm fixing up the workbench. I've realized that I spent 20 years trying to be better than him, only to realize I'll be lucky if I'm ever half the man he was. I learned that true legacy isn't what you leave to people, it's what you do for them when they aren't looking. The world might have seen a failure, but I finally saw the truth. We spend our lives looking for heroes in the stars, never realizing they were sitting right across the dinner table.